Hey guys, it's Michael.
And Carter.
This is the 4th episode of Hammercircuit. Today we're going to be talking about how social stigmas affect education. So Carter, we're going to be talking about social stigma now, right?
Indeed we are.
So are we going to just do it pertaining to America or just in general?
I was going to make it more of an anecdotal experience. You know.
So I guess let's talk about it in regards to like our high school career and social life so far, maybe.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about how a big social stigma we see is with college. It's the idea that you have to go to this 4-year college that costs a ton of money out there. And you see these articles that report top 10 colleges, and you'll never see a trade school or any specialty education. So it gives us the idea that anything other than a 4-year college that costs a lot of money is lower education.
Yeah, it's interesting how trade schools and like community colleges are looked down upon. I mean, there are some things that they don't do the best at, but for something like general education, you know, that has to do with like writing and reading, like literature, stuff that doesn't really change very often, I think community colleges, at least some of them, can do very well in those aspects.
Right, and Mr. Young, in our personal finance class, he talked to us about community colleges a while back, and he said, just consider you leave community college with hardly any debt, little to no debt, especially if you do something like the A+ program.
Right.
You leave with little debt and an associate's degree. You go to a 4-year college, you leave with a potentially a lot of debt and only 1 degree.
And specifically in like our high school district, I'm guessing because it's kind of well funded, is like there's a lot of pressure to go to, or at least sometimes to go to a 4-year college.
Right, and that's even something, I'm not going to drop the name of our high school, but you have a point right there, because one of the bragging points about our school is something like a majority of the students that enter our high school go to a 4-year college or some form of a college. That's one of the bragging points of our high school, and it's almost pushing that stigma that you have to go to a 4-year college.
I mean, it's a common phrase, but like sometimes college isn't for everyone. Some people just like they leave high school and they get a job and they're good with it, and other people, they leave high school, go to college for a little bit, and then they drop out and try starting their own thing.
Yeah, and just to add on to that a little bit, as like college isn't for everybody, we see a lot of people going into college and majoring in things that aren't applicable to what we really need.
Right, they're unsure about what they want to do in the world, so they major in something that seems general enough but piques their interest a little bit.
Yeah, what you're trying to say is they go into something that they find interesting, but then there's no job to then fill that position or their interest.
Like, I understand that you should try to find a career that you enjoy doing, but there's some exceptions to that, because like just certain areas, they're not in as much demand.
Yeah, that's a good point, because really I think to some extent it's, yeah, we care that you have a passion, we care that you want to do something you like, but how's that going to make you money? Because at the end of the day, the world kind of operates on money. Obviously, there's morals, ethics, religion, blah, 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 different things that people care about. But at the end of the day, you can't get much done if you don't have the money to get things done. So how is your interest really going to fuel capital gain? How is that going to work? Well, if you're going into something like the fine arts or the liberal arts, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying there may not be as many opportunities.
I think the thing about, and I'm not in theater or any fine arts program necessarily, but the thing about those classes and what I've seen, because I do have some friends in the fine arts field or who are trying to head towards that direction, is that it's a lot of it's very experience focused, and it requires a lot of self-study and stuff, because if you haven't watched any movies at all, you're going to have a way tougher time, and there's probably going to still be holes in your knowledge when you come out.
Yeah, I agree with that, because have you ever obviously you had to take some sort of an art class for middle school. Mm-hmm. Have you ever gone into, I'm not sure which class you had in middle school, but you go into that class and there's always one kid in every single art class that's super super good at art. Like, they're experienced, they've been doing it in the past, and they tend to get an A easy peasy. But then kids like us who aren't experienced in it get like a B.
Since we are learning, like you know, like usually, I mean, if you have a good teacher, he'll tell you what you can improve on, or other times he'll say like, well, you could have done better in this area. But like the issue is like something like art or fine arts, that's a subjective thing. And the thing is that college, on the other hand, most of the time it's a very structured program. You know, you have a set list of courses, you pay this amount,
right,
you attend it for 4 years. The thing is that contrary to doing that, what I would think that should happen is that there's these things nowadays called MOOCs. MOOCs stand for Massively Online Open Courses, I think. I'll double check that. But they can provide you with knowledge and like certification and many things. And
my father, for instance, he got his what is it?
Real
estate license taking one of those classes. He had to take an actual test at the end of it, but as far as all the learning went, he learned everything online and then went and took the test and got it. Like, you can take these courses to learn things.
Right. So I mean, why not have it where something like fine arts, where for maybe a set price, like $150 entry fee per student, you know, the person enters, and they may have little to no experience, and over the course period of maybe like 12 weeks or something, maybe less, I'm not sure, you know, they can learn quite a bit. It's just the only thing is that you're still going to eventually have a teacher who needs to get paid or compensated in some way, who's providing real feedback. So
yeah, there's no way around that. I think
you need some sort of feedback for whatever you're learning.
With music, it could be a bit different. Like, there's online. I'll give you an example. There's this guy named Kyle Laundry. He's a pianist, and he does these online Skype sessions or video sessions where you pay him money, and you either videotape yourself doing something, or you can do it live with him, something along those lines. And he will critique you. He'll help you. He'll give you advice. That's something that you could do with instruments, but I'm not sure about art.
Well, I mean, it's like painting something. It's like, hey, look at this piece of art. What do you think? That's subjective. Music, and I mean, like, I'm a little bit more musically trained than like art, like visual arts trained. But like, from what I can see, is music does follow a general structure in some things. You got minor chords, major chords, that type of thing.
At the end of the day, the reason why you clap for somebody playing. You clap for somebody playing Moonlight Sonata third movement. The reason why you clap for that and not just like a toddler hitting random keys is because one takes a level of skill to learn, the other is just not skill at all. It's not to say that the toddler isn't producing music. It's you get my point, right? The toddler's producing music, but
look at pop art though.
Well,
that's weird, you know.
There's a stigma behind that as well, Michael. I see that too with modern art. I don't know the specific story behind this. Don't take my word for it, but there was like some modern art museum in California that purchased a rock for like $10 million and is I can look it up. This guy, in a nutshell, spent a ton of money moving this giant rock. It's a 340-ton rock, and he's just moving this thing, and it's in California. California tends to have some more experimental art.
Free-spirited people, I guess.
Free-spirited people.
I mean, I'm not a native Californian, so, like, if I'm wrong, correct me. Give me a critique, I guess.
I know 2 Californians. One of them was born in Missouri and moved to California. One, born in California, moved to Missouri. He's a little weird. Not trying to be mean. I mean, weird in a good way.
That's a pretty small sample size, Carter, so.
Right.
Anyway, so that's like fine arts and like acting and stuff. So like, you know, the putting a value to that's very hard to do. Considering the amount of artists and stuff there is, like there should be some sort of like community run program where like even maybe a non-profit perhaps. Like maybe they exist, maybe they don't. Like we might.
I have no clue how that would work, because I think really the only thing that's going to propel your art career, and art is in like just a brief, a general statement in general. So that includes theater, music, actual oil paintings. There has to be a level of skill that's going to have to play into it at the end of the day if you are going to make money off of it, because
you have to build it up. You have to do a lot of devotions.
There's a reason why the Mona Lisa is worth a lot of money and your toddler's finger painting is not worth a lot of money, because only some skilled people are going to be capable of bringing in that income, and even with them it could be very difficult. Like Van Gogh, I believe he only sold like one painting in his entire life, and now he's considered one of the revolutionary famous painters that we study in history.
The good thing about this education thing with trade schools and stuff is that we're seeing like this trade school type of thing shifting into high school. So instead of having to, spend 4 years sitting in a desk, listening to people, like writing notes down, PowerPoint notes down, like the stuff that normally is associated with high school.
From experience, high school isn't all bad, but we see a lot of the same old. And I don't know if that's because Michael and I are just different, but I doubt it. I feel there's a lot of kids that are quite content with their experience that they get out of high school. If you are going to have a good experience in high school, you have to be in charge of it entirely. If you're just going through the motions and doing the bare minimum, you're not going to enjoy yourself.
Me and Carter can both agree that we have a couple friends who are just kind of going through the motions. However, we do have other friends who are like they kind of understand that there's a little bit of like a fake structure that's just kind of keeping us there, Sometimes the high schools do kind of good job of like helping people break out of the monotony that it is. I mean, what do they really tell you? They tell you like join a couple clubs, maybe do an honors program and like tutoring and stuff. Even that, like that can becoming monotonous. And like what I've seen is like something like a trade school that focus on like training a specific skill set that isn't necessarily always like that high school isn't really good at teaching. Like, for example,
I completely agree with that.
The precision engineering school.
Yeah.
Right.
So, just to review, because people may not have seen the first podcast.
Right.
Next year, I'm going to a trade school, and it deals with precision machining. At least that's the branch I'm going to. And next year, Michael is...
I'm going to Spark Tech, which is that specializes in like software and like community projects. So like any company can like submit a project proposal, and like our team at Spark, we can like build an app for it. Examples I've seen were like medical applications, and like one was like an app for like the St. Louis Cardinals, which is like that's really awesome. Yeah,
man, that's really useful. And I think overall, but this goes for both of us, by the way, we're only going to be in our actual high school for our core classes.
Like, so basically about half the day.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Then all of our electives are being filled up with I like to call it our alternative education, because it's not lower education. Let's face it. You see these teachers, and you see it too. They bring you into a classroom. It's like happens once or twice every semester. They bring you into a classroom. In some classes, either science or biology or English or wherever. They bring you into a classroom, the counselor's room. They talk to you about college, and they say, "What college are you going to?" And it's not popular to say, "I'm not going to a college."
It's a very difficult thing to say, because the majority of people will say, "Oh, I'm going to this, I'm going to that." Another thing is like they didn't seem to put that much effort into emphasizing how great something like the program such as South Tech, which is like a trade school. It's a lot of like it's very engineering focused, and like Spark are, because like they spent maybe, I don't know, like 40 minutes describing it, and like from my personal experience and the stuff I've done and read about it, like that barely scratches the surface on how cool it was. Like
exactly.
They show you like the fireworks and stuff, but they don't actually show the other stuff besides it.
They did the same thing for me with precision machining, or just South Tech in general. They just said, "Hey, South Tech, there's all these fields, come and join." And I actually went there and listened to the people talk, like the actual teachers. And when I went to precision machining, the teacher said, "Yeah, most of the kids that work here, or that were in my class, they're now working at either Boeing or NASA." So it's like,
and you didn't hear about that.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
You didn't hear that about that in our common ground.
I didn't hear about a Cardinals app either when I was hearing about Spark.
Right. So with high school, because of the group methodology and the group thinking, is that those new ideas might be weighed down and might be pulled under the bridge, so to speak. Or the path more taken. There's like this really cool poem by Robert Frost that I read a couple days back. It's called The Path Least Taken. And like it's kind of like, you have a majority of high school students who are taking a path that's happened multiple times for most people. It's you go to high school, you take your classes, and you might take some elective classes, right? You might be in like 2-3 clubs, right? Then you go to a 4-year college, you got your student debt, then you're working like maybe a white collar, blue collar job for like the next 20-30 years.
It might be it's safe to say that I wouldn't even say that it's just given to them if they're already going to be getting a job fresh out of college, because there's a lot of people that struggle to. This is something that Mike Rowe talks about quite frequently. He's an actor. I believe he is behind the show Dirty Jobs or something like that. Not literally dirty jobs. There's nothing gross going on. It's just people working with their hands. And what he talks about is that every single year there's 5 million jobs that go untouched in the engineering field. And I think that includes software engineering as well. And you can pull that up.
Well, I mean, like, I was reading the article, and it was like, I was reading an article from this news website I use called Hacker News. It's not all hacking related. Most of it's just like,
it's just a catchy name.
It's a catchy name. It's mostly about programming and like entrepreneurship. But like, it was talking about how, yes, the amount of people who attend who are enrolled in CS or majored in computer science has increased by maybe like 1,000, maybe 2,000 over the last like
decade or so.
Decade or so. So, but the thing is that that's been dwarfed by the fact that the amount of people who are enrolled in college in general hasn't increased.
From what I remember you saying was 55,000 are enrolled like every single year, and that was like the increase. It went from like
54 to 55.
Yeah, actually, it was to start out. It was from 54. Then the next decade, it was like going down, and then it wasn't until 2014 when it jumped up.
Yeah, that was on the line graph, and then you saw that all the other ones like engineering, mathematics, science, those actually increased. So it's really interesting that you see those engineering things, and people are like, they're just not willing to put the effort into doing some like engineering related jobs sometimes, which is really sad.
Right, or maybe it's not that they're not willing to put the effort into. I think it's the social stigma that's pushing them away from taking those jobs, because I think there's the idea that people, because as we discussed, the teachers they're advertising the commonly taken road. That's what all the teachers are advertising. Our society puts pressure on people who ever would dare to think of, how dare you think of going to a community college? Do you want to grow up and be poor? Do you want to live under the poverty line, Michael? You want to go to a community college? You want to go to a trade school? You want to be poor? Huh? Is that what you want?
No.
You want to be living in a slum? That's it's not that direct, obviously. It's a hyperbole.
Obviously.
But it's, there's pressure to go to some expensive college. But then these kids going and getting their liberal arts degree or whatever degree they're getting in college then have the trouble of trying to find a way to apply that education to an actual job that exists and make money with it.
And then what you'll see sometimes is that people will get their degree. They'll maybe be in that field based off of that degree for maybe 5-10 years. But eventually they switch careers, and the career that they end up with might have nothing to do with the college degree that they had. So they had to pay off a student debt for something that maybe was only useful to them for maybe 5-10 years. Which, I mean, I don't know if the trade-off's worth it, but like you're basically, you're eventually sometime in your career you have to re-educate yourself without having to pay for it like with money. Instead, you're paying for it with time. So, and the thing is that when you go to college, you're not only paying for it with time, you're paying for it with time and money is just a side effect of spending time on doing something.
Right. And even the idea of, it's kind of crazy to think, I don't know about you, it's going to sound like a tangent, but trust me, it relates back to what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
The concept that learning something costs money, knowledge is money, that's almost bizarre in my head, that you have to spend money to purchase knowledge. Because, is that bizarre to you?
It is, a little bit. But you know what I think is a really interesting concept is that in some trade schools, you don't even have to pay that much. You just have to work. You have to basically have like an apprenticeship in that field while you're learning. So you're basically learning on the job, which makes a little bit more sense.
Right.
Because you're going to end up there anyway.
They're replacing the money with work ethic, and which I think is very healthy. I think...
Because you're going to have to work to make the money anyway.
Exactly.
So.
Like, I'll give you an example from the field that I'm going into, precision machining. This kid, he didn't have a... I'm not going to mention names, but he didn't have a particularly good background, really. He spent his first few years of high school in a very bad... doing bad things. He came from a foster home, I believe. But then, when he got into precision machining, he worked really hard, won several competitions, and ended up going to a community college. But then what happened was, because he continued his hard work, Boeing picked him up. Boeing paid for his community college, and eventually they transferred his credits and such to Wash U. So, I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job of explaining it, but he started off at a community college and had a rough background, but because he worked hard in that field, because this is how the field operates, trade schools operate, they ended up hooking him up with a Wash U degree in engineering for free, as long as he worked for Boeing afterwards. So they replaced the money with working for Boeing. That's what they did. And it may not sound like a big deal, but an engineering degree at Wash U is pretty big.
That almost sounds like the stereotypical American dream, the rags to riches, so to speak.
Yeah,
that
and
we
it's
often
almost
hear.
It's almost as if that rags to riches American dream isn't always found on the common trail. Interesting, Mr. Navazilao.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Henry. So that's like the stigma around education is like there's usually a big expectation that like after high school you either have to go to you have to go to some sort of college, and those trade schools usually they have a very like they have stigma. They have like some sort of negative stigma attached to it. Now, but if you think back, and I'm not advocating for the medieval ages, but a lot of back in the medieval ages, there were a lot of like trade schools. There were a lot of apprenticeships, and like the people who came out of it, like they were really skilled in that job, and at that time,
100 years ago,
right? And at that time, those jobs were high in demand. Something like blacksmithing, for example, you had blacksmith apprentices, and once they came out of their apprenticeship, you had another blacksmith, and a lot of people needed metalworking done. So, that's just one example. But I'm sure there's a lot of other like trade school examples.
I could give you one right now. There's a kid who graduated from South Tech. He the trade school that I'm going into. He was in the welding program. At 18 years old, he left. He won some competition and welding competition of some sort, and he left the school. And some welding company picked him up, and he works like I believe like 10, 12-hour days, so long days. But he welds bridges, he welds skyscrapers, and welders are high in demand because, like we're saying, there's that 5 million job gap right there. There's not enough supply, but there's a big demand for welding. Ergo, welders are making a ton of money. And he's making 6 digits as a welder. He's making over $100,000 a year.
And that's because something like welding is like looked down upon, and it's like it seems like a job that is just like it seems like below our level or something. Basically, it's the stigma, right?
Right. Even with the social stigma, in movies they make plumbers and people working with their hands out to be these greasy characters, lazy. They're not that hardworking. You can see movies that highlight. If you're
working 12 hours a day and you're welding, here's the interesting part: you don't have to deal with like business politics. You just work for 12 hours, you get paid, and this guy's he's not getting paid like $30K. He's getting paid what, a six-figure salary,
he's
right?
Getting paid six figures every single year, or I'm not seven figures, obviously, but
not seven, but six.
He's making over $100,000 a year,
and that's from welding, which, like, unless you did the research, that seems a little bit surprising, like, because, like, you know,
it sounds shocking, but
right.
It's true. Like, welders make a lot of money. So do other people in this engineering field. And Michael, with your profession, we were talking about earlier, there's only 54 to 55,000 people every single year who are going to be doing what you are doing now.
And keep in mind that, so I'm not sure if that's the right population number. I'll look it up.
That's roughly the amount.
I think the amount of people who are actually doing college programs is like 3 million. So that's a very small fraction.
You are, just to give you an idea of how many people are leaving college with the degree that you're going for, or like something in your field that you're going for, that's the percentage out of the U.S. population, which is 0.00018%.
So obviously there's going to be way bigger demand than there is the supply.
I would say it's bigger, like, that's a bigger demand than even welding. And considering that human-robot symbiosis is getting closer and closer, it's a huge demand.
Oh, yeah. So you have teachers kind of telling you what the common route is, like, just, like, go to 4-year college, like, maybe major in engineering, science, mathematics. I mean, the thing is like, the advocation for something like welding or programming or something that's like more of like a trade thing isn't as often, you know?
If anything, they frown down upon that idea. There's also, and I know this for computer programming, there's the idea that all the computer programmers are just these really fat, gross-looking people who have like a pizza face, and they're just eating Doritos, sitting on the computer all day, when that's not the case either.
Yeah, there are some cases of that, but they're not actually as often as you think. And as I said in a previous podcast, first programmers were actually women, and they did their job really well, and they set up a really good foundation for what is computer science right now. You know,
right.
After, I think the amount of women in the field of computer science just like dropped drastically sometime around either the 1950s or 1960s, and then it just completely flipped on its head, and it became sort of like a male-dominated thing, when initially it was only women who were doing it because, you know, all the men were at war, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and there were like a lot of smart women who could totally do things that
right.
They were just there and they were able to do it. So
that's the concept behind, like, that's when what is it called? I think it's like second wave feminism, or no, it might have been the first wave of feminism. The idea that the men are off at war, and it's like, wait a minute, women, they don't just have to sit in the house all day. They can actually do stuff. They're not just, you know, like these robots.
Whether you're male, female, something in between, even if you're 14, you can find some work. You don't have to. Don't blame it on. Well, I mean, I'm not advocating child labor, but like, like, just here's the thing: when you're 16, when you're in high school, even when you're in middle school, sometimes you do not need to fall into the trap of just doing what everybody else is doing. You can choose your own path. You can go on the internet instead of looking at cat memes, even though those are really nice. I mean, I love my good share of cat memes.
Me too.
Right. You can go onto MOOC, as I mentioned previously, or find a YouTube playlist, and you can learn like really advanced stuff. You know.
Exactly.
You don't, because here's the thing. Like, not everybody learns at the same rate. And the thing about high school and public education is they're limited by the fact that they're educating a group of people, so they have to make sure everybody's on the same page, right? And then when one person or a couple people who are not on the same page, they have to spend maybe a couple months or a year tweaking the whole material
System.
and everything and the system.
Yeah, they try to make it, instead of viewing some people as just exceptions that they have to maybe help out, instead of it being like individualized, they see us all as like one breathing organism, and that's not the case. We are individuals and we all have our own needs with education, yet they try to tweak the entire curriculum to make it seem like we're just one organism. And that's the drone mentality behind some of our education, the Scantron tests with bubbles and such.
Think about it another way, you know, and I'm not trying to say anything about like low IQ, high IQ, but like look at an IQ distribution graph, right? Not everybody is going to be at average IQ. Not everybody is going to be at below average, and not everybody is going to be at high average.
Yeah, there's the bell curve.
There's the bell curve. Necessarily advocating for it in America, but in Germany, and you probably know a lot more about this, but there's multiple schools depending on your competence.
Yeah,
in certain
they don't necessarily
things.
do it in IQ. It's not like they test your IQ and then they're like, oh, you're 80 IQ, so you go to this special school.
Right,
but at the same time, what they do is they test kids, and by the time that you're in the 5th grade, you're either going to go to a trade school or to the primary school, which is Gymnasium in Germany. And the kids in trade school are going to be using their hands. The kids in Gymnasium are going to become something like a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. And then there's an entire other school called Hauptschule, which is pretty much for the kids that they don't have the brains or the work ethic to apply themselves to get into trade school or Gymnasium. So they're pretty much just taught how to punch train tickets and stuff. And
that system, it does have good parts. It does have flaws, you know. Work ethic can change. Brain capacity can change.
Work ethic can overcome a low IQ or learning disabilities.
But the thing is that work ethic and brain capacity, just high school itself is not going to help you build that. It requires time outside of high school, doing things not necessarily related to high school. Sometimes it can be related to high school, but doing it on your own time, on your own free time as well, to build that work ethic. Putting extra time aside and saying, I want to work on this, achieve it, and say, this is what I did, not because the high school told me, not because anybody else told me, but because I realized I need to be able to do things by myself without anybody telling me, because I know it will benefit myself.
As Terrence Roberts said, you are the CEO of your education. Terrence Roberts was one of the Little Rock Nine, just to let you know.
Yeah, he's a very, I think, at least from hearing his presentation, I mean, that was very influential.
Yeah, he came to our school and talked to us.
I took a lot away from what he said.
100%. So we're probably going to close off pretty soon. To really just wrap up what we said, the social stigmas that are presented to us often force us to take paths that are not destined for success, money. They're not jobs that are actually applicable, or jobs open, I should say. A lot of the education we learn isn't applicable in the workforce. And as you said, sometimes individuals have to grow on their own, and we have to, you know what I'm saying, Michael?
So, like, if you do want to take an alternative path, like, say you want to learn about psychology, you don't need to major in it. That's the thing. And people should learn that too, is like, don't always think that college is going to be able to teach you everything about something.
Completely agreed.
Yeah.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Hammercircuit.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Carter.
See you next time.